Welcome to the Injection Connection, in-depth discussions with thought leaders and professionals in the polyurethane infrastructure repair industry, hosted by Jim Spiegel, Vice President of Alchemy Speed Tech and board member at the International Concrete Repair Institute.
So welcome to the Injection Connection podcast with the host here, Jim Spiegel. This week we have Jack Whitworth on, National Sales Manager with Aquafin. Hey, Jack, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you, Jim.
Good. So it's, true to the Injection Connection format, we're trying to give interesting information to the chemical injection, the chemical injection industry as a whole. And Jack is a special guest of ours. We're actually, we're competitors. But I've known Jack for a number of years, as a competitor, and you've been a coworker of some of my coworkers, and a lot of great things to say about Jack and his experience level. And so what I wanted to do here, Jack, was just start off and give you the mic and have you give just a little brief background of yourself and how long you've been in the injection industry and things like that.
Well, a little bit about myself. After high school, I actually joined the military and was a border guard on the East German Wall for 4 years. Got out, went to University of Colorado, Denver, got a degree in business marketing, and ended up getting my first job actually with the Fastenal company as an outside salesman. And then after about 6 months, I became a district manager. And then my first interaction as a factory representative was with Unitex Construction Chemicals. And we made epoxies and some things like that. That's where I was first introduced with chemical grouts back in 1993. And I had a relationship with Mr. Iske at the time. And every time I had a crack injection project for epoxies, but we had moisture coming through, I'd turn the job over to Mr. Iske. So I originally, started up from an epoxy company, but then an opportunity came up to work directly for a chemical grout manufacturer. I took that moment, had some really good mentors in my life. They shared all their knowledge. They're all pretty much hence retired now today. And I've been doing chemical grouting right now. I'm turning, but right at about year 26.
Wow. 26 years. That probably goes quicker than you thought, huh?
It feels like I started a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I'm a little behind you, but I think I'm on year 15 or 16 right now. And yeah, it just goes quickly. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
And no one ever says when they're a kid that they want to be a chemical grout salesman, right?
Didn't know anything about it until I actually ran into Mr. Iske.
Okay. That's interesting. I didn't know a lot about you. You're on a guardsman on the East German Wall?
I was did patrols about 265 days a year in the field, protecting the neutral borders between East Germany and West Germany.
Wow.
And yeah, it definitely makes you realize how the opportunities we have for ourselves in this country.
Yeah, absolutely. That's pretty interesting. I never knew that about you. And then you started with Unitex, you said. So yeah, that's are they part of Dayton? Is it Dayton now, or was it?
They did sell to Dayton. We were actually a private label company that made a lot of epoxies for other companies that are out there that sell epoxies, and then we had our own line as well.
Okay, yeah, I'm familiar. Okay, so we have a few topics we're going to try to get through. I think it's appropriate for the time. Who knows like when people listen to this down the road, but it's April 10th, 2020. We're smack in the middle of this COVID-19 coronavirus lockdown. To say it's a crazy time is an understatement for us, especially for us as outside, sales and sales managers and salesmen and technical support. So How are you dealing with it? I know you probably spend most of your time on the road, right?
Well, I'm typically on the road, probably, I would say 40 to 45 weeks per year. So I've had to adapt and how I can get our information out without having that face-to-face contact. So that's probably been the biggest adjustment for me. And then, of course, being locked in one location is a big adjustment for me. But, we're figuring out ways to where we can reach out and still go through some of our training modules through sites such as Zoom and that. Yeah. And we still get daily calls. Water intrusion is one of those things, as you know, Jim. Typically, it's a reactive type of industry. So regardless of the times that you're in, when those problems arise, typically people are looking for a solution.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure you went through the 2008, 2009. Well, of course you did. Situation as well. And I was in the industry at that time as well. And I don't know if you'd agree or not, but it kind of seemed like, the repair industry was actually, I mean, there was nowhere to hide, right? I mean, everybody got affected, but the repair industry seemed to hold pretty well, at least, in my world. Did you see the same where you were?
I absolutely did. And, during those times as well, as of today's times, you still have a lot of infrastructure needs that are out there. And that seems to be really the hot opportunities during the COVID-19 is a lot of infrastructure and some municipality type of opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah. And your family, they're okay having you home? You're not driving them crazy?
Of course, I'm driving them crazy, but we're learning to adapt to each other. And I've got a 18-year-old boy at home, and it's keeping them on lockdown with nobody in or him not going out is a definite challenge. But we understand the conditions we're under, and we're making the best of it.
Yeah, yeah. We laugh in some of our sales meetings that, I'm sure it's the same for all outside salesmen. You have all these type A personalities that, are used to running around and doing dinners and events and, being on site and just chatting away. And, we got to give a lot of credit to the families now that have to listen to all their BS all the time now. We can't spill it out on everybody else at the moment.
I think that's my wife's daily prayers as we get over this so I can go back on the road.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So getting into a little bit about the injection industry. I mean, obviously you have a ton of experience, so I'd like to get some insights from you. One of the things we had a couple bullet points coming into it, but what do you think are some of the strengths of the chemical grouting industry? And that's a little bit of a vague statement, so I kind of followed it up with what's kept you in it for you're going on 26 years, and what do you like about the industry, and why do you think it has such a strong future?
Well, I like the industry because it's challenging. No job it typically is the same. You have to be quick on your toes. You have to be able to react to emergencies. And, that's also ties into, chemical grouts will always be necessary. But, the job never gets boring. Plus, you get to see a lot of locations and areas that really the general public or probably 75+% of your population don't even know exist. So it's exciting to get out there and be a solution provider. That's what really keeps me interested in it the most.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. Actually, that's a good point that, the places that the chemical grouting industry takes you is just unbelievable. Walking the gallery of a dam or something like that. It's a place you would never, otherwise never know existed. And there's some really, really interesting projects out there. So one of the things that we kind of struggle with, I shouldn't say struggle with, but I mean, it's a concern is, as I just said, no kid will say, I want to be a I want to represent a chemical grouting manufacturer. You know, I want to be a sales professional for chemical grouts. Do you guys have any, I don't want to say tricks because that's not what you're here to share, but you know, how do you get young talent interested in chemical grouting? Or do you...
You know, typically, and through my years of doing this, such as even myself, it was really, you know, it's almost, you almost have to be lucky to run into somebody that has interest in it, because it is the unknown that's out there.
Right.
And, you know, my opportunity to run in and turn jobs to Mr. Iskey gave me the ability to learn the chemical grouts in it. And I found it extremely interesting. So I paid a very close attention to it. You know, there is no magic, because if we went to college fairs and different things like that, they'd think we were crazy. You know, because it's not that understood. But, you know, I think where we find most of our opportunities for representatives is typically in the field. You know, that could be a contractor, that could be a distributor. We typically have a good knowledge of what their work habits are, and really they have some fairly decent knowledge of the chemical grouts. Because if you take a distributor salesman, for instance, you might find a guy that's selling a ton within one location and there's 5 salesmen. I want to meet that guy. I want to know why he's finding these opportunities. And those are people we try to look out for.
Yeah. I agree with you with the contractor side. You know, it's invaluable to have that field experience, especially in chemical grouting. It's something almost on every episode of this podcast in some fashion, the field experience comes up, you know, and it's a really hard profession to fake, so to speak, you know.
Absolutely. You get one shot at it, and you know, that's where the representation becomes so important, is when you're called out to help somebody with a problem. That represents your company, you know, and your product itself, and the quality of your product. As the old saying goes, you know, nobody really hears about the good things, but 1,000 people from one person can hear the bad things.
Yeah.
So it makes it, that is a challenge in chemical grouting. And that goes to, you know, there's really a lack of education that's available out there. And we kind of drive through the mantra of, we believe in growth through education. The more people that we can make comfortable with it, the more opportunities we can actually have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you and I have talked about that at some industry events and some, you know, some networking events that, you know, it really serves us. Like, I mean, even in this medium here, you know, obviously we're competitors, but, you know, to have a unified message of how work is done, and, you know, having the same recommendations, so to speak, I think would do all of us, you know, more of a service to work together than to try to work apart. You know, you have some, you know, we know who some of the suppliers are out there that are a little, you know, I'm not bad mouthing anyone, but I'm just saying not everyone has the field reps that really know what they're talking about. I mean, I would say, you know, I know there's a lot of great chemical grouting people out there, but there's, you could probably count on both hands, you know, the real good ones. You know, I think you would probably agree with that. So it's, you know, we need to work together and educate as well as we can. You know, I'm on that grouting committee, and Elena's on the grouting committee as well. And I know, you know, I think you've sat in on some of the meetings also.
Correct.
And those meetings are great because it's, you know, it's all the, you know, all the heads of the industry, so to speak, you know, trying to work towards a unified goal. But, you know, one of the issues, and this just is kind of coming up organically in conversation, but I'd like to get your thoughts on it. One of the things we kind of struggle with in that committee is the whole marketing side of things. So, you know, you have your SLVs, your LVs, you have your semi-rigid, your semi-flex, you know, there's all these ways that you can skin a product, right? And, you know, how do you view that as far as how some people might referred to as an SLV versus an LV, and you know how it is. I mean, different companies will just say, "Oh yeah, you need an SLV. Here you go." you know. So what's your opinion on that as far as nomenclature and some of the confusion?
Well, I think a lot of the confusion starts with an earlier comment you made. If all of the grout manufacturers could work together, one of the biggest issues we have is ASTM guidelines.
Right.
And it not only affects the commercial and industrial side, but it really affects a lot of your AASHTOs in that. If they're going into tunnel projects, there's just this unknown of what can be utilized under certain conditions. And, it's the message that we have to send a clear, concise message to the engineering and the design community and the contractors on, one of the most important things that I like to strive on is what are the points you need to consider in selecting a grout. As you know, there's no silver bullet to stop water infiltration or stabilize the soil. So, I think that the more education and the more fluid we all are together and spreading that communication is actually going to help the business grow atrociously. And, we look at where new buildings are being built. They might be old moss lands or water-bearing areas where they've filled it in. There are areas and locations where we never imagined the building would sit on top of it. These are, as you know, great opportunities for us in the chemical grouting side of things. And, we see a lot of advised materials, I guess you would say, being utilized. I believe in what we call an assessing type of practice, to where, there's a lot of questions that need to be asked before we throw an answer out of use an LV and SLV. It could be questions such as, what's the method that we can approach and actually get the grout there long enough to set up? What is the substrate types and conditions? Because as you know, all substrate types could utilize a different type of grout. What is the pHs of the water source? What's the nature, of the crack? Is it a moving crack? That's going to, be things that we need to have answers for. And, things like what's your water flow and the source of your water? Those become very important questions. And I think where we've hurt the industry a lot of times is people have lived by the silver bullet theory, rather than trying to spread a good, consistent message for the industry.
Yeah, I would agree completely. And some of those products. I mean, you obviously you worked for kind of the Kleenex, of the industry at one point, and we still see a lot of specs that are just old. Products that aren't available anymore. I mean, you still see like the 3M products, for instance, and I think the engineer outreach is a huge problem. I mean, we're diving into a lot of specifications, of course, right now, because everybody is working from home, and we just have the bandwidth to dive in to some things a little deeper than we normally would when we're on the road. And we had a sales meeting today, and we kind of not laughed about it, but we were definitely commenting. It's like a lot of these specs we're looking at are just wrong, and I do see a little bit of a problem in our industry. Well, I should say in our specific segment of the industry, because a lot of people go out and not mentioning any names, some of the larger manufacturers that aren't necessarily into chemical grouting, they'll kind of tack on chemical grouting as part of their envelope spec, for instance, as you well know. And I feel like there's a lot of misinformation in that sort of generic approach to chemical grouting. And, I just think there's a ton of engineer education that could help, because a lot of these specs are just wrong.
That's correct. And that's, you started off earlier with, some of the programs ICRI is trying to put together, and they're trying to put down good guidelines for the chemical grout. It's a start.
Right.
We have a lot further to go, but it is a big challenge because we're doing this cut and paste type of silver bullet approach. And really, I think that's one of the things that gives the industry a bad name.
Right.
Because when you take that type of approach, you're probably going to have some failed injections that take place.
Right. Right. Yeah. And as you mentioned, they talk about all the negative stuff. You get the wrong guy out there to support the wrong product or even the right product. That's another kind of little nuance of our industry that's a little tricky. And we try to tell people all the time that, two people can go out there with the exact same product and have completely different results. So you have to make sure that the person that's out there knows what the heck they're doing, and also the manufacturer that's behind them knows what they're saying. So that's a little tricky part as well. Sometimes some people say, well, I used XYZ material and it was, it didn't work. Well, it doesn't necessarily mean the product doesn't work. Would you agree with that?
I absolutely 100% agree with that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and that kind of address, we also want to talk about what needs to be improved in the industry. I think we're all on the same page. That's the weird thing that, we all know that the education piece needs to improve. I'm obviously involved in ICRI. I know you're also involved in ICRI, but just giving it a platform to plug some other organizations. Is there any other organizations that you would say, that are making a nice contribution to the chemical grouting world?
I really don't see it. I've spoken in some other organizations on chemical grouting, and
Yeah.
it was a great way for them to get a couple points continuing education, but really there was no real opportunities that was generated through those organizations.
Yeah. Yeah, it's unfortunate. I know ACI has a guideline. I have read through that. It's pretty good. But yeah, it seems like ICRI is probably. I mean, I guess that makes sense, right? It's the Concrete Repair Institute, so it's fitting that they would have the most focus. Have you ever worked with SWR?
I have.
Now that's more of a contractor group, correct?
It is correct.
Yeah. And I saw that they had some pretty good guidelines as well. I understand what you're saying. We're such a specialty application. It's hard to kind of pull all these efforts together. Okay. And moving on, how do you see the future of chemical grouting? I mean, you've been in it a long time. Let me start by saying, have there been any developments or products that have changed the industry while you've been in it?
I've seen a couple that have come out of Australia and that. And of course, we've seen the products that were asphaltic based that came into the industry. They went about as fast as they showed up. You saw a lot of those, with the transit authorities for train galleries and et cetera. The ideas were great, but the field applications, let's say, were not so good.
Right.
And those type of products are always going to come into our industry. I think that the industry in itself, we have to remember really that the chemical grouts have probably been in the United States for maybe 40 years. I mean, we're really being pushed and marketed. And as we continue to grow, the opportunities are going to grow just because we're building on today. I mean, we're making man-made islands over in the Middle East, and we're filling swamps up with fill and building high rises on them. So that, in my opinion, I think the industry will grow greatly in the next 10 to 20 years.
Yeah, you're right. One of my coworkers, he always says all the good building spots are taken, and we're not going to stop building, so.
Well, there's a lot of variables, that if you go into an area that has a lot of fill, or you're deep into the water table, there's some phenomenal um, positive side waterproofing systems that are available out there. The problem is most of those waterproofing systems, the confinement to the membrane itself becomes key in stopping the water intrusion. So, you have two trades kind of working against each other there with that application. You have your waterproofing contractor, and then you have the guy that's pouring the concrete or shooting the shotcrete.
Right.
And, it's very hard with some of the demands on some of today's waterproofing. It really goes back to the confinement. That's why we will always have opportunities with the chemical grout, is because of the lack of confinement to a lot of the positive side membranes.
Yeah, absolutely. And this might be getting into a little bit too much, proprietary information, but I'll broach the topic anyway. So, yeah, I always find that not funny, but ironic that a lot of times when we get out to these projects, there's already a big problem, and the first thing that some people throw around are, well, what's your warranty, and warranty just comes up time and time again, which I get it. It's building products, but it's hard to get through to the client sometimes to let them know that you already have a big problem and we're just trying to help you fix that problem. So how do you handle that sort of topic? And like I said, I know this might be a little proprietary, not looking for anything,
Yeah, well, material warranties, as a manufacturer, it's very hard to give a warranty to cover both the material and the labor.
Right.
So, with a good quality applicator that he knows what he's really doing, will I give material extensions? Yes. But the one thing we have to remember when we're dealing with chemical grouting typically is we're actually doing our work into areas that are unknown. Our products go places we can't see.
Right.
So workmanship of that product it becomes very, very important. We don't control who bids the projects. We're there to assist and try to make sure the project goes as smooth as we can. But you'll have agencies that are switching to specialized type of grouts just to kind of reduce the amount of people that can bid on these projects. Because the reality is, in chemical grouts, a guy can go rent a airless sprayer from Home Depot and go buy a bucket of grout from the distributor and say he's in the business.
Yeah.
There lies the challenge. And so it's, trying to create that network and those relationships with your design community to say, hey, utilize these resources, please, in this bid. And that helps our industry actually, because we're keeping people that may not have a lot of knowledge. They're just seeking out bid opportunities and bidding the project.
Yeah. I would agree completely. When I first started, it reminds me of when I first came in the industry, and I was probably only in for a couple of years, and I was just a young and I guess eager sales guy, and we were selling like kits, kits where you could pretty much start up a company and get injecting. It's the guy that's throwing it in the back of his truck and injecting. And I did a big email blast about that very thing, saying, hey, here, plug this into your quote and off you go. And the backlash that I got from that was, now looking back on it, I just think, oh, how stupid was that? What was that message? But to your point, the workmanship is so important. And I think especially in our industry, we, how it is with LinkedIn now and everything that's online, and we're all connected, and we see who's talking to who and who does business with who. It's almost better to have your approved kind of, I don't want to say approved, that's getting into a little touchy conversation too, but your key guys that use your stuff and use it well, and go to market with them.
Absolutely. I'm 100% agree with that comment.
I think where people sometimes people get in trouble where they are bouncing around all these products and, doing different things, and they just don't know how to use that product the same, for instance, and it doesn't go as well. Then they say, going back to my previous point, that product is junk, and it's not necessarily the product's junk. It's different than what you're used to using,
That is correct. And, we have little things that are different, even within, our hydrophilic lines, our acrylate lines,
Yeah.
and so, it goes back to a contractor. He gets comfortable with certain grouts. And it's like teaching your child something new. They're going to hesitate and challenge you on it, and it's being able to prove on why you need to make the change and try something different, because after assessing the site, this is what you need to use, not what you're familiar using.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And the acrylic grouts that you mentioned, there's only a couple people that really know them well, and Monica as well, and Monica is well respected in the industry, and I've had a lot of great conversations with her. I mean, I personally think the acrylic grouts could be used, in much more places than they're currently used, just because people aren't that familiar with using them.
I agree with that. And also using some of these polyurethanes with acrylates in conjunction together it's something that's probably not done enough.
Yep. I agree completely. I mean, I've spent some time with some European manufacturers, and, in Europe, for instance, that's quite common, where there's like a primary and a secondary injection, where they pretty much refer to foams as like a kind of a water control or a water stop. And then there's a secondary injection of whether it's like a 2-part low viscosity resin or even an acrylic gel. So I agree completely. I think that whole perhaps primary, secondary treatment is just something that's not used here.
That is correct.
Yeah. All right. Well, Jack, we're hitting we're close to the 40-minute mark, and that's where we like to kind of wrap it up. I appreciate you being on, and who knows where our podcast goes. We hope to create some interest, and maybe we can start to have some group discussions as well, with several suppliers perhaps. But did you have anything else off the top of your head?
I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity. I think it's great that we can sit down and actually have a discussion like this. As you said, we're friendly competitors, but really I think it's, I look at it and you look at it differently, as, if we all can come together and work together, then we're going to actually help all of ourselves by actually growing the industry together. And so I appreciate you allowing me to talk with you today.
For sure, Jack. And thank you to Elena as well for lining this up. She reached out to me initially. So, and stay safe and well over there. And I hope to see you sooner than later at the next industry event.
Sounds great. And hope stay safe, you and your family. And thank you very much for your time.
All right. Thanks, Jack.
You bet. Have a great day.
All right. You too.